how can leaders develop the necessary agility within the team to ensure there is no lag and service deficiency in the team deliverables? Okay, so how do you deliver, or rather, how do you develop agility within the team? Firstly, agility requires that it is not just you on top of things. You have a whole lot of people collaborating with you to get stuff done, right? And that those people who are collaborating with you have the necessary expertise and willingness to actually get things done. So to get agility, I think the first thing is environmental awareness. As a leader, what have you done to encourage environmental awareness within your team? How freely is information flowing within your team? Because if information blockages are there, how is agility going to happen? 3, do you have empowered people within your team to take quick decisions? So I'll give you an example. There is a company called Zappos. A lot of you might have heard of it. At Zappos, a customer executive has the empowerment to spend up to $2,000 on a customer complaint, and there is no limit to how many customer complaints they can spend this money on. Now that's agility, which means this customer relation executive doesn't have to come back to the supervisor or to the supervisor's leader to ask for approval. They're empowered enough to do that. Empowerment brings agility. The other question that I have is, what leadership traits are essential, particularly for the current times when teams are working remotely? Look, I think firstly, trust. The trust and the faith that if they are out there, they're going to be working and they're not going to be, playing foosball or something else. That trust is very important. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting on their case and it's not going to be helpful to any of you. The other thing is empathy. Realizing that while people might be working, sitting at home, they may not be working in the same manner as you have been used to seeing them work. And that the change situation also requires a change style of operations, being empathetic to that and being willing to accept that new norm as something which is there. I think the third thing is because there's so many things on hand. I remember in the initial days when the pandemic started, we had distributed chores around the house, including, me doing utensils on some of the days and doing other stuff as well. Now, things need to be prioritized. So as the leader, I would expect that one of the things the leader would also do is prioritize not just their deliverables, but also help the team members prioritize theirs, right? Unless they're already highly empowered teams, in which case you don't really need to get into it because they're capable of prioritizing on their own. But trust, empathy, the ability to prioritize, and ongoing communication doesn't have to be 2 hours a day, but frequent communication so that that connectedness stays. I think those are some of the things which are really important in today's time for leaders. Okay, there is distributive leadership a way to empowerment? I wonder who has asked this question. This is a very powerful question, and not too many people actually talk about distributive leadership. For people who may not be aware of the concept of distributive leadership, this emerged more in the arena of education research, but now you have various organizations and industries actually, adopting this. In short, what happens in distributive leadership is that the focus is less on the traits of a leader or on a particular situation, but the focus is more on how various tasks can be stretched or distributed across the span of the organization, right? And therefore, the leader's critical task there is to engage in tasks that are distributed across the organization. So how does the leader, follower, situation, all of these align? That defines the success of distributed leadership. And to your question, I think it goes a long way in helping empowerment happen, because it takes the focus away from the leader and also, puts some of the onus on the followers as well. There is another very neat question. I'm actually delighted at some of these questions. What is the new concept of connected leadership? I'm wondering, have some of these questions been thrown to catch me off guard? Because these are really tough ones, but also exciting. Okay, uh, when we are talking about connected leadership, there are 5 principles that the leader would really follow. So, are you inspirational enough to your team members? Right? How do you motivate people? How do you inspire people? Challenge number 1. Challenge number 2, are you authentic? Do your people see you as authentic? If they don't, then obviously that's a problem. Challenge number 3, do you share power? Um, Challenge number 4, are you collaborative? And challenge number 5, how exploratory are you? So these are the 5 principles of connected leadership. And to your question, uh, um, um, if you are actually following the concept of connected leadership, empowerment actually becomes easier. So if you look at all these things, inspirational, authentic, collaborative, sharing of power, exploratory, which means more conducive towards innovation and change management, all of these go a long way towards delegation and empowerment of people. Okay. Then there is a question, how do I cultivate a sense of belonging within the team so that everybody understands and realizes that one team member's failure or success is everybody's? I think that's a very straightforward question. Uh, Simple on the surface, difficult, challenging to actually achieve. Um, think for a moment, not from an organizational context, but from a family's context. So in a family, you have a lot of people. Uh, the mother has a say, the father has a say, right? Or depending on who is more dominant, it could be a patriarchal family or a matriarchal family. But at the end of the day, a lot of decisions get taken, which are either good for the entire family or bad for the entire family. How do families work on this? Uh, Families who are able to do this really well essentially talk openly and transparently with each of the stakeholders present. They discuss what could be the potential opportunities and the potential threats of any decision being taken. And then a lot of those decisions are taken. Sometimes the parent might actually take a decision, even if there is a lack of conformance or validation or consensus from all the stakeholders. And that's exactly what happens in leadership. If you really want to drive that culture where everybody owns the success and failure, I think decisions need to, okay, decision can still be taken by the leader, but what happens prior to the decision, which means debate the entire problem, understanding the entire problem, if that is managed collaboratively and you are able to give stakeholders an opportunity to speak up, share their perspective, debate the perspective even if you don't agree with it, that'll be a situation where people actually own the success as well as the failure. And I might also add uh, that if you ask a lot of questions at that stage, if you act as a facilitator or as a coach when that is happening, that makes the process even more effective. And one more thing I've seen successful leaders do in getting people to share success and failures both is getting people to set goals for themselves. I see a lot of organizations where goal setting is actually not handed down from the top, but within businesses, people are asked to articulate their own goals, set their own goals, and come up with a plan on how they're going to achieve it. Now, when you're doing that as a team, you own the success and the failure both. And if your performance measurement is also giving greater focus to what you're doing collaboratively than at an individual level, then it is even more so. If you go back to the culture model that I showed you, that's where a collaborative culture really gains over a competence culture, because in collaborative cultures, people are actually able to set goals also collaboratively and set about achieving them collaboratively as well. So that's my response to that question. You have, I hope that answers it. Okay, there are a lot more. Um, Dr. Dheer says, so cultivation is enabler for competence. Uh, Cultivation is in the short term an enabler more for empowerment, Dr. Dheer. But in the long term, what happens is where cultivation cultures have been allowed to breed for a longer time, competence becomes a logical outcome of the process. Um, so, to your question, competence will follow a cultivation culture. But the focus of a cultivation culture is not necessarily competence in the short term. It's more of nurturing and allowing people to do whatever they do in line with the set vision and goals or purpose of the organization. Uh, Setu Shah says, nice take on collaboration. Thank you, Setu. Is this model 4 quadrants or a journey? And how do we foster collaboration? Setu, those are a lot of questions there. Thank you. Uh, this is a model, Setu. Now, so this is not necessarily a journey, it's a model. But so what this means is there would be a dominant culture within any organization. It could be control, cultivation, collaboration, or competence. But it doesn't mean that across the organization, that entire culture would predominate all the time. There could be certain pockets where there could be other cultural fragments also being visible. So that's one part of your question. Is this a journey? No, I wouldn't say it is a journey. I'm not even sure if it ought to be a journey, because depending on the kind of organization, the industry you're in, the life stage at which you are operating, uh, at different stages, different cultures would actually work more effectively, right? Also, depending on what it is that you want to do. So, if I want to apply agile in an organization, I would work with a cultivation or collaboration culture. But if I'm doing Kanban, I would go in more for a control culture. Um, you know, um, so craftsmanship, competence culture. So it's certainly not a journey, and it's not that one culture is bad compared to the other. To a large extent, it's also defined by what is it that you want to achieve. Okay. Does empowerment hinder delegation process? This is from Preeti B. Preeti, empowerment does not hinder delegation. If you look at it, empowerment is a much more high value item. In delegation, you are just assigning a task. In empowerment, the very fact that you're empowering someone reflects the kind of resource you are working with, and this is obviously a very high order resource, so that's good. The second thing is, as a leader, you are able to give that autonomy to the person, and allow them to take decisions on their own, work independently on it, and own their results as well. So I don't see why empowerment should be detrimental to delegation at all. I think empowerment is great, does not interfere with delegation. The reverse, however, may not be true. Delegation may not necessarily lead to empowerment unless both the employee and the leader are mature enough, one to empower and the other to get empowered. Okay. Anish Mascreen has asked a question. Does the leadership continuum path run on similar lines to the situational leadership model? Anish, yes and no. So the situational leadership model from Paul Hersey and Kenneth Blanchard basically talks about 4 quadrants, where depending on the maturity level, competence and commitment level of the resource, you would apply the appropriate leadership style, which could be directive, coaching, supportive, or delegative, right? So the emphasis there is on diagnosis first, and after diagnosing on competence commitment, then applying the appropriate style. The continuum, as mentioned by Schmidt, is actually just that. It's a continuum. The situational leadership model is not a continuum. At any time, I could be looking at different resources, and I could be dealing with them very differently. In the leadership continuum from Schmidt, what he's really talking about is that there are different ways of dealing with people depending on the situation, depending on the context, and depending also, of course, on the maturity level of the person. So there are similarities, but no, it's not that they are replacements of the other. One is not a replacement of the other. Okay. Preeti has asked a question: empowering the team, making them accountable. What if the project does not go the way it had to and fails? as the leader is not accountable, but the team is. So, Preeti, projects don't fail because a leader is accountable or the team is accountable. Projects fail if what was supposed to be done has not been done, right? Uh, if anything, if the team is more accountable, the chances of the team actually getting that deliverable done is more probable than if the team were not accountable at all. So, no, it's not that because the leader is not accountable, the project will fail. Projects will fail either because the leader has empowered the wrong team. So they were not the right people to have been given that empowerment. That could be one area where the mismatch has happened. uh, because once you are empowered, the leader is actually then not monitoring you closely. There is less frequent feedback and so on and so forth. So I think it essentially boils down to the quality of the team that you've empowered to. If that has not been thought through, that could be one of the reasons why the project might actually end up failing. Krishnan says, can we state that the empowerment would finally make me redundant and make me ready for the next role? um, Krishnan, great point. And by the way, that's a thought which keeps a lot of leaders from forget empowering, even delegating, because the fear there is of becoming redundant. But I'm glad you asked this question, and I think that shows your leadership maturity, Krishnan. Uh, Truly effective leaders look at redundancy in a very positive manner. For them, redundancy is where they've set things in order at the current leadership role, and therefore they are now ready to transition to the next role. And I think, yes, empowerment does lay the foundation for that to happen. Peter, I have a lot more questions, but I can also see that we might be constrained for time. So, what is your suggestion? Do I take more questions or?
Yes, sir. We can definitely go ahead. We can have those questions addressed, and we have time. Yeah.
Okay, so Chevy James says, want empowerment create insecurity in a leader, as this empowerment might nurture a new, more competent leader in the team. Chevy, I think that question might have been asked before I responded to Krishnan here. Yes, that is a concern which a lot of leaders have. But remember, uh, you have been empowered to reach a certain level by a certain leader. And I think that's very visible to everybody within the organization, including you and the leader himself or herself. So for this particular role, you might now be an equally good resource, but it's also true that your leader would now be ready for the next transition, and that's really their journey. And effective leaders would be looking at that. Uh, Meenal Nikam has asked, my question is, how do I deal with leaders who are involved only in transactional activities getting done without empowering and training them to go one level up based on the skills? Meenal, great question. Meenal, to a certain extent, this will also depend on the kind of culture which is predominant in your organization. If it is the kind of culture where over delegation, or in other words, dumping of responsibility happens, then obviously it's a tough one. And you have two recourses. One is to, manage that conflict with your leader assertively. So the skills which would help you there are assertion. The other, of course, is, your influencing style. I would recommend a joint problem solving influencing style, also otherwise known as a collaborative influencing style. Um, uh, and I would recommend that. So if I were in your position, I would actually broach this with my leader. The way I would do it would be important to the outcome. I would share with my leader what I feel is happening and how I feel about what is happening. Many a times we don't share our feelings, we just share um, our thoughts, and therefore it becomes difficult for the leader also to be empathetic. I would share my feelings about what is happening. I would also share my expectations, and I would put it in a manner where my leader sees not as a complaint, but as me coming up to him or her and saying, hey, look, I am ready for more higher order tasks as well. And why don't you look at me for that? Okay. That's my suggestion on your question. Uh, okay. Some questions which are similar, I'm skipping. What is crucial to making the leap to leadership? Okay, look, that's a great question. Now, I sense there's a bit of philosophy attached to it and a bit of pragmatism. Uh, my feeling, and I might be a rare commodity in that sense. My feeling is leadership happens first in your head. Are you ready to be a leader? Are you ready to take on the mantle of leadership? That's where the leap into leadership actually starts. If you're ready here in your head, I think that's the first hurdle that has been crossed. The second is self-awareness, asking yourself, what does it take for me to demonstrate leadership capability, whether it's in terms of new skills, new knowledge, new attitudes, and then working on those. And three is putting yourself out there, and saying, look, I'm available, I'm willing to take on responsibility, and I'm happy to learn as well. And the fourth is humility, because no matter who you are bound to falter somewhere or the other. You will miss out on a few things. And the humility to be able to say that, look, I don't know everything. I could go wrong, but you know what? I'm willing to be coached. I'm willing to be mentored. I think those are things which will help the leadership leap. How to handle disagreements with colleagues and teams? While it's not really related to the topic, but I'm glad you asked that. Essentially, what you're talking about is how do I manage conflict? Look, there are 5 styles that you could use in managing conflict. You could use a partnering style, which is actually what results in win-win, conflict management outcomes. Or you could use a challenging style, which is more aggression and a win-lose kind of an approach. You could be obliging or abstaining, which are both conflict avoidant. Or you could use a settling style, also known as a compromising style. Um, uh, at a subtle level, even the settling style is a um, conflict avoidant kind of a style, because you are not really going all the distance in being assertive or collaborative. I would recommend in that situation to use a partnering style, which is talk about your interests, but also take out time and opportunity to ask people about what their interests could be. Because if you can align your interests and theirs, that is the only sustainable recipe for conflicts to be managed and not come back. Because if that has not been done, you may handle the conflict today, the conflict will come up again tomorrow. So that's my recommendation there. If you would like to take, uh, what is the success mantra for effective leadership? I'm pretty sure if I ask this question, I mean, even to some of the top leaders that I've had the benefit of learning from and respecting, I'm not sure even they can answer this, and certainly I am not the right person to answer this. Um, uh, Success mantras for leadership keep changing and evolving over a period of time. What made me successful 15 years ago, if I continue doing that without changing, may not make me successful today, and certainly not ready me for success tomorrow. So if I were to pick up just 2 things to answer this question, one would be the willingness to keep challenging your assumptions. A lot of times we tend to ignore the paradigms that put us in a cage. If we can identify what paradigms we are laboring under, and if we can then work on those paradigms, show the initiative to work on those paradigms, I think that is one. The other is the willingness to continuously learn. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft Worldwide, um, um, one of the things that he does is, even today, with all the time constraints, he still makes it a point to pick up multiple new courses to go through every day, every week. Now, here is a person who has achieved what one would, or most people would say, is the pinnacle of success, but is still spending that much of time and effort on continuously upgrading himself. And I think that is very important, because the moment you stop doing that, you stagnate, and leaders cannot afford to stagnate, right? So those are 2 things that I would want to say in response to that question. Uh, how does empowerment drive high performance? The answer is in that question, because what is empowerment really? When you empower people, you have first satisfied yourself that they are the right people to empower, which means you have a bunch of people who are highly committed, highly competent, independent thinking, can take decisions autonomously, are willing to take ownership and accountability. So, these are people who are already poised for high performance. All you are doing as a leader is just unleashing them out there to the world, right? So your job is not to do anything. Your job is to ensure that you have the people who can be empowered and then unleash them and get the hell out of the way so that they can do what is needed to be done, which to your point is delivering high performance, delivering high results, high innovation. Those are some of the things that one could do. What are the key delegation strategies a leader could implement? Well, we spoke about it during the course of the session. Before you delegate, ask yourself the first question: is this something I should be doing, or is this something that someone else should be doing? If it is something which you are supposed to be doing, well, this doesn't get delegated, obviously. But if this is something which somebody else ought to be doing, sure, you could get them to do it, provided you have validated that they have competence, you validated that they have the commitment, and you are willing to invest time in giving them feedback on what they're doing. You know what happens when you do this to people that you delegate to over a period of time? You're able to create individuals whom you can then empower. And that, as we said, is a much more higher value item, right? Okay, Peter, I have a hard stop in 2 minutes.
Yes.
And so therefore, I just wanted to say it was such a pleasure to be here. The questions were so brilliant, and a lot of thoughts for me also to think about. As some of the stuff like, distributed leadership, connected leadership, I also haven't been thinking about consciously, and therefore there's a lot that I would want to take away. Thank you so much.